Checkmate, he said softly, sliding the queen across the board with quiet finality. The Millionaire CEO froze. Her confident smirk vanished. The room, once buzzing with laughter, fell deathly silent. Her fingers twitched over the king, but it was useless. There was nowhere left to run. Gasps echoed around the room. The guests, the executives, even security, all stood frozen. A 13-year-old boy, the son of the cleaning lady she barely acknowledged, had just destroyed her in front of everyone. "How?" she whispered, her voice cracking. But he didn't answer. He just leaned back in the chair, calm like he'd done this 1,000 times before. What she didn't know was that this boy didn't just learn chess. He lived it. And the moment she laughed at him, she started a game she could never win. The grand chandelier sparkled above the Sterling Estate's living room, where laughter bounced off marble walls and champagne flowed like water. High-ranking guests mingled in designer gowns and tailored suits, exchanging fake smiles and business cards. In the corner, nearly invisible to everyone, a woman in a faded uniform scrubbed the floor on her knees. Miriam Washington, 42, worked as a maid here for nearly 5 years. No one knew her name. They just called her the help. Next to her, sitting silently on a worn backpack, was her son, Jalen. 13 years old, skinny, quiet, shoe scuff, hoodie slightly too big. He said nothing, just flipped to the worn pages of an old chess book, his finger tracing moves on an imaginary board. Nobody noticed him, at least not until the CEO arrived. Vanessa Sterling, tall, cold, beautiful in a sharp black dress, stepped into the room like she owned it, because she did. Every inch of the estate, every face in the crowd, every dollar spent tonight belonged to her. She clinked a glass. "I want to thank you all for coming to the Sterling Foundation Gala." Jalen looked up briefly, then back down at his book. Miriam whispered, "Jay, stay close and don't stare." He nodded, quiet, always respectful, always observing. But what nobody saw, what Vanessa never could have guessed, was that the small, silent boy in the corner had the mind of a grandmaster. And tonight, she would unknowingly invite him into a game she couldn't begin to understand. Vanessa Sterling always ended her galas with a little ritual, a glass of red wine, and a casual game of chess in the center lounge. Tonight was no different. Her private marble chessboard sat atop a velvet table, each piece hand-carved from ivory and obsidian. She motioned to her assistant, "Bring the board. Let's show these people I'm not just a millionaire, I'm a strategist." A small circle of guests gathered. She moved her queen's pawn forward with theatrical flair. "Queen's Gambit," she announced, as if the move made her royalty. From across the room, Jalen had quietly closed his book. His eyes watched the board, his lips barely moving, calculating, predicting. Vanessa noticed. Her eyes narrowed. "Hey, you," she said, tilting her head at the boy. "What are you looking at?" Miriam froze. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, he didn't mean." But Vanessa held up a hand, grinning wickedly. "Relax. I'm not offended. He just seems fascinated." She turned back to Jalen. "Tell me, little genius, do you play?" Jalen shrugged. "A little." The crowd chuckled. Vanessa smirked. "A little? Well, come on then. Let's make it interesting." The room stirred. She pointed at an empty chair across from her. "Sit. If you win, I'll double your mom's salary. Heck, maybe even triple it." Gasps. Someone stifled a laugh. Miriam's face turned pale. "Miss Sterling, please, he's just a boy." But Jalen had already stood up, quietly, calmly. He walked over and pulled out the chair. He looked Vanessa in the eye. "I accept." The laughter rose. "Adorable." Vanessa muttered under her breath, "This'll be fun." What no one realized was that the game had already begun. Phones came out. Laughter buzzed through the room. A few guests whispered, "She's really doing it?" Another said, "This kid's about to get destroyed." Vanessa Sterling leaned back in her leather chair, sipping wine like a queen before battle. "Hope you know how the pieces move, sweetheart," she said with a smirk. Jalen didn't answer. He just nodded and stared at the board. She opened with another flashy pawn move. The crowd clapped, amused at the spectacle. Jalen studied the board carefully. No rush. His fingers hovered above the pieces before moving a knight into a subtle but precise position. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Oh, he's got moves. People chuckled. Beginner's luck, someone muttered. Jalen said nothing. The next few turns passed in rhythm. Vanessa played boldly, aggressive and flashy. Jalen moved slowly, silently, but his pieces danced across the board like they had a mind of their own. Laughter faded. Then came the frowns. One guest leaned in. Wait! That's the Karokin defense. Another whispered, no way a kid knows that. Vanessa's eyes flicked from the board to his face. Where'd you learn that move? She asked, tone slightly sharper. Jalen finally spoke. From books. And my dad. Simple, soft, but there was something unnerving in how calm he was. Vanessa's smile wavered. By the eighth move, the tone of the room had shifted. Guests were now silent, some stepping closer. A woman stopped recording and just watched. Jalen adjusted his rook. Someone near Vanessa whispered, "That's not a random kid." She tightened her jaw. Because for the first time in a very long time, Vanessa Sterling was losing control. The air in the room had changed. No one was laughing anymore. The crowd leaned closer. The smirks faded. What began as a joke had become something else. A quiet, electric tension buzzed through the Sterling Estates parlor like the moment before a storm. Vanessa moved her bishop with confident hands, but her jaw had tightened. Her eyes darted across the board, reading every piece, but something wasn't right. Every time she thought she'd taken control, he had an answer. Jalen tapped his knight forward again. Quick, clean, deadly. A man in the crowd murmured, "That's a two-move trap. If she takes his pawn, she loses her queen." Vanessa's hand froze midair. She noticed it too. She pulled back. Whispers grew louder. Is he trained? Who is this kid? This isn't normal. Vanessa leaned forward. Her voice lost its playfulness. All right, kid, time to stop playing around. Let's end this. Jalen didn't flinch. He simply looked up and said softly, "Chess is like life. You don't move just to react. You move because you already know what's coming." Vanessa's breath hitched. That voice, too calm, too wise for a 13-year-old. She blinked, suddenly aware of how many eyes were on her. Not him. It wasn't a joke anymore. They weren't waiting for the maid's son to fall apart. They were watching her unravel. She tried to recover. Cute. You memorized some quotes. That won't save you. Jalen made his next move in under 5 seconds. A castle shift that protected his king and cornered her knight. It was a pro-level transition. Vanessa sat back, genuinely unsettled now. He's not playing to survive, someone whispered. He's playing to win. Miriam stood quietly near the back, eyes wide. She had never seen her son this focused, this still, but also never more alive. The guests now watched in silence. Vanessa wiped her palms on her dress. Jalen was dismantling her strategy one piece at a time, not with flashy moves, but with elegant control. Every shift was planned, every decision intentional. And Vanessa, she was reacting, scrambling, defending. She didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a game. This was a quiet war, and she was losing. Jalen's fingers rested on his rook. He looked up again and said in the same calm tone, "You thought I was playing your game, but I've been playing mine since the moment I sat down." As the tension in the room deepened, Vanessa's expression darkened. She tried to hide it, but her eyes darted, not at the board now, but at Jalen. He sat still, silent, eyes fixed, mind unreadable. "How does he know these patterns?" someone whispered. "He's not just good, he's trained." Vanessa clenched her jaw, her fingers twitching above her queen. And then, for a brief moment, the world seemed to pause. The camera slows. Jalen breathes. Flashback. The living room was small, dim. A folding table with missing legs, lit by the warm glow of a cheap lamp. A younger Jalen, maybe 6 years old, sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes sparkling as he watched a man in a worn t-shirt move black and white plastic chess pieces across a cracked board. "This piece is powerful," the man said, gently lifting the queen. "But it's the quiet ones, the pawns, the knights, that change the whole game, just like life." That was Derek Washington, Jalen's father, once a national chess champion, once destined for greatness, until a sudden heart attack at 35 stole everything. The fame, the money, the future, gone. After that, it was just Miriam and Jalen. Most nights, she worked 2 cleaning jobs and came home past midnight. But no matter how tired she was, she always found him asleep with a chess book on his chest. She'd wake him gently and say, "Just one game?" He would nod, eyes still sleepy. They'd play in silence. No lights but the stove. Miriam wasn't a master, but she remembered everything Derek ever taught her, and she passed it down, move by move. She bought him used chess manuals from thrift stores, printed tournament transcripts off the library computer. When she couldn't afford a new board, she drew one by hand and taught him to play blindfolded, imagining the board in his mind. He never complained. He studied, listened, learned. When she worked late at the Sterling estate, he sat in the back closet, playing games on a cracked tablet against grandmasters online, under a fake name. Most of them never knew they were losing to a 12-year-old. And every time he won, he whispered to himself, "One day, I'll show them." Back to present. Jalen moved his bishop with calm precision. Vanessa stared at the board. She blinked twice, her breath shaky. She'd been so sure this would be easy. A laugh, a story to share at brunch. Now, she was 2 moves from checkmate. "How?" she whispered. "How do you know all of this?" Jalen looked up, not with arrogance, not with pride, but something deeper, something unshakable. "My father taught me how to play," he said softly, "and my mother taught me how to never give up." Vanessa didn't respond. Vanessa's fingers hovered over her last rook, but she hesitated. For the first time in the game, truly afraid to move. The whispers had stopped. The room was dead silent. All eyes were locked on the board, on her, on him. Jalen's face was calm, his breathing steady, his eyes laser focused on the pattern unfolding in front of him. He leaned forward gently, almost respectfully. "You left your queen exposed," he said quietly. Vanessa's eyes darted to the left, and she saw it. Her queen, unguarded. Her defense broken. Her next move, completely useless. Jalen lifted his piece, the knight, and gently placed it down with the softest tap. Checkmate. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the room. Gasps rippled from the guests. One man even whispered, "No way," as if he needed someone to confirm what he'd just seen. Vanessa's mouth fell open slightly, but no words came. Her perfectly composed face, the one that ran boardrooms and crushed negotiations, cracked into something unfamiliar. Shock. She stared at the board as if the pieces had turned against her. Then, slowly her hand trembled. She reached forward and tipped over her king. The small sound of the wooden piece falling was deafening. Someone clapped. Then another. Soft, unsure, but real. Miriam stood frozen by the doorway, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move, didn't dare breathe. Jalen didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stood, pushed his chair back gently, and extended his hand. "Thank you for the game," he said politely. Vanessa didn't take it. She couldn't, because in front of the entire room, her guests, her investors, her staff, she'd just been publicly destroyed by the son of the woman who cleaned her floors. And the world she controlled had shifted. Vanessa forced a dry chuckle, her voice brittle. "Well, that was entertaining," she said, trying to regain control. "You got a sharp mind, kid. Maybe beginner's luck, huh?" But no one laughed. The silence around her said it all. Her guests weren't smiling. They weren't amused. They were impressed by him, not her. One woman muttered under her breath, "That wasn't luck. That was genius." Another added, "I've never seen anyone play like that, not even adults." Vanessa stood abruptly, brushing her dress like dust had somehow attached itself to her pride. I'm sure we've all had enough fun for one evening, she snapped, walking away from the board. Try to outrun the humiliation still clinging to her heels. But by morning it was too late. A short video clip, just 15 seconds long, had already made its way through Sterling Enterprises' internal chat. Vanessa, eyes wide, hand frozen, a soft voice saying, "You left your queen exposed, checkmate." Within 48 hours, it had over 200,000 views on LinkedIn, company Slack groups, and a dozen internal email chains. The headline on one blog read, "Maid son humiliates CEO in live chess match and teaches a masterclass in strategy and grace." That same week, a local private academy reached out to Miriam. "We saw the video. We'd like to offer Jalen a full scholarship, including mentorship with our national chess coach." She wept when she read the letter. And it didn't stop there. One of the guests, a silent partner in the company, called her personally. "Miriam, I watched how your son carried himself and how you've raised him. We'd like to offer you a position in client relations. You deserve better than scrubbing floors." For the first time in years, Miriam felt seen. And Jalen? He returned to his chessboard. Same quiet corner, same cracked tablet. But this time, the world was watching. The lights in the auditorium dimmed as the final match of the Junior Chess Championship began. Rows of parents, coaches, and spectators sat in tense silence. At the center, under a bright spotlight, Jalen sat alone on one side of the table. Opposite him, a tall, confident boy from an elite private academy adjusted his tie and tapped his fingers nervously. It was a final round. Jalen didn't speak. He didn't look around. He just looked at the board and moved. The match was clean, methodical. No flair, no theatrics. Each of Jalen's moves tightened the noose with quiet precision. His opponent was good, trained. But Jalen was something else, composed, unshaken. By move 22, it was over. He leaned forward and tapped his rook into place. Checkmate. Gasps, then thunderous applause. The announcer's voice rang to the hall. "Your new national junior champion, Jalen Washington." Flashes erupted as cameras clicked. Reporters rushed in. Miriam cried quietly in the audience, her hands clasped over her heart. Later, backstage, as the crowd began to thin, Jalen packed up his board with the same calm as always. That's when he heard the footsteps behind him. He turned. Vanessa Sterling. No cameras, no staff, just her. She looked different, not in appearance, but in posture. Smaller, softer. "I watched the whole match," she said. "You were incredible." Jalen didn't respond. She stepped closer. "You know, after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened." He kept packing silently. Vanessa exhaled. "You reminded me what real intelligence looks like. Not the kind that flaunts its wealth, but the kind that walks into a room and doesn't need to say a word." A pause. "I was wrong. About you. About everything." She extended her hand. "I'm sorry." Jalen looked at it for a moment, then gave a small nod. "I'm not mad anymore," he said simply. "You just helped me become who I was meant to be." The camera fades in on a small classroom inside a community center. Wooden boards, old plastic chess sets, and a dozen kids crowded around a long table. Jalen, now in a simple hoodie and jeans, stood at the front, smiling, teaching. "Okay," he said, moving a piece across the board. "If your opponent rushes in, don't panic. Stay calm. Stay thinking. That's how you win." One boy raised his hand. "Mr. Jalen, is it true you beat a CEO when you were our age?" Jalen laughed softly. "I was 13. And yes, that story is mostly true." A little girl giggled. "They really called you the maid son?" He nodded. "They did, for a long time." Another kid chimed in. "What do they call you now?" Jalen paused, looked at the board, then looked at them. "I don't really care what they call me," he said with a soft smile. "But I do know I earned every name they gave me." Then the narrator's voice returns, quiet, powerful. "They laughed at the maid son, but now they call him master." Fade out.